1950s, the nation recognized in its midst a social movement called Beat Generation. A novel titled On the Road became a bestseller, and its author, Jack Kerouac, became a celebrity, partly because he'd written a powerful and successful book, and partly because he seemed to be the embodiment of this new generation.
The king of the beats, Jack Kerouac, was a shy man. He preferred to read to his friends or in jazz clubs, and he shunned exposure, like his appearance on Steve Allen's television show in 1958. Jack Kerouac's most famous novel, On the Road, became the key statement of a generation, a rambling, rambunctious travelogue about Kerouac and his buddy Neil Cassidy as they bummed, hitched, and careened across America. It was published 25 years ago, and this summer hipsters of all ages gathered at a Jack Kerouac conference in Boulder, Colorado. Alex Van Oss prepared this report.
Who was Kerouac? Well, a college athlete, a merchant seaman, a railroad worker, a Zen Buddhist, a conservative Catholic. Essentially, of course, he was a traveler, but he was an American traveler.
Everything about him was engaging in those early days. He didn't seem like any other writer that I knew. He wasn't wary, opinionated, cynical, or competitive. And if I hadn't already known him by reputation, I would have pegged him as a poetic lumberjack or a sailor with Shakespeare in his sea trunk. Stocky,
I think Kerouac qualifies as a Catholic saint. This is a straight Catholic thinking saint. I'm going to soak up the poison and die of it. That's what he did.
William Burroughs, John Cleland Holmes, Ken Kesey, just a few of Jack Kerouac's friends, lovers, and fellow travelers who mingled at the conference. And then there was a whole new generation, buying Kerouac posters and T-shirts, wandering from panel discussions to poetry readings, or just sitting out in Boulder's clear summer sunlight. It was a beat scene, perhaps, the word meaning everything from a hustle to a state of grace, from beat down on drugs to beatific from visions or meditation or jazz. The beats emerged after the Second World War. They were a youth movement you could snap your fingers to, or, as many did, turn your nose up at. Kerouac came from a working-class French-Canadian background, spending his childhood in New England. He went to Columbia on a football scholarship. His friends in the big city ranged from university intellectuals to drug peddlers. Some of them were writers and poets who were to create a new American myth, a vision of freedoms to be found wherever you are, whether boozing in Denver, New York, San Francisco, or breaking loose, beating it, getting on that road. The beats explored the territory of each other's minds, according to one of the central figures in Kerouac's novels, the poet and author of Howl, Allen Ginsberg.
From my point of view, I was interested because I was very young and naive and felt untried and awkward and virginal and didn't have any idea what life was. And so I was really fascinated by Kerouac's sort of tender macho experience, or by Burroughs's cynic, tender wit.
Kerouac was a writer. That is, he wrote. Many people who call themselves writers and have their names down on book jackets are not writers, and they can't write. The difference being a bullfighter who fights a bull is different from a bullshitter who makes passes with no bull there. The writer has been there, he couldn't write about it. And going there, he risked being gored.
Boulder, Colorado's the home of the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. There's a film about him called Heartbeat, even a magazine, the Moody Street Irregulars. And there are some half-dozen biographies in print, with more to come. The first was written by English professor and ragtime pianist Ann Charters.
He had in his mind from the very beginning a sense of the life is a dream, a person who really accepted the whole dream of America that children are given in this country, that you can be anything. The world is your oyster, they always say. And coming up smack against the red brick reality of working class life, of the difficulty of corresponding his background with the expectations and realities of his friends at Columbia, Ginsberg and Burroughs, who were such an influence on him as a writer. The kind of opening to the West, which someone coming from the East, the idea of the cowboy and meeting one, a Gene Autry and Neil Cassidy.
I used to hit curbs like when I was on my first job with bicycles, bouncing off because it was a single, no brakes on it. I'd hit cars, bounce between them, throw my feet out, just like you throw out the feet to guide yourself onto rocks. And man, I tell you, sliding right through, real straight.
Neil Cassidy, the hero of On the Road and other Kerouac novels, hard-driving, sexual, fickle, brilliant, always arriving, always leaving to move on to the next moment. Kerouac's soul buddy, his alter ego, some say. Cassidy's stories and letters inspired Kerouac to free up his writing, to trust his dreams and intuition, and to sketch his experiences in words as a kind of great open eye.
But the roadblocks, now that's something else. Don't go on the wrong side of the bridge railing. Why, in fact, the first thing I did, going toward Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak, same rail. You know what happened right there? Right front wheel came off. What are you going to do? At that point, all you can do is blast.
Neil Cassidy later broke with Jack Kerouac and took up with writer Ken Kesey and his psychedelic traveling bus full of merry pranksters, which came to symbolize the restlessness of the 1960s counterculture. Kesey was influenced by Kerouac, though he never knew him personally.
His gift to me was how to just keep going on and piling stuff up and not rewriting until you came up with a rhythm that locked the mind in. That forces you to make connections with your mind that Kerouac was making with his mind. You can't deny his rhythm, and then pretty soon you find yourself thinking from this thing over to this thing, and you wonder, how did you get through that? And you know how he got through that, through unimaginable wildernesses of synapses. He leads you through those things. That's what I learned from him.
Jack told me a little earlier he was nervous. Are you nervous now? No? Good. Jack, got a couple of square questions, but I think the answers will be interesting. How long did it take you to write On the Road?
3 weeks.
How many?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Jeez, that's amazing. How long were you on the road itself?
7 years.
7 years. I've heard that you write so fast that you don't like to use regular typing paper, but instead you prefer to use one big long roll of paper. Is that true?
Yeah. When I write narrative novels, and I want to change my narrative thought, I keep going.
You don't want to change the pages at the end, you mean?
100-foot-long teletype paper.
Oh, teletype rolls. Where do you get them?
Huh?
Where do you get the paper?
In a very good stationery store.
I see.
When I write my symbolistic, serious, impressionistic novels, I write them in pencil.
I got the most hard question of all, but everybody always puts it to you, I'm sure. How would you define the word beat? I don't mean why not time. I mean, really, is there...
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic? All right, I ask. Well, about this...
To appear on television or on talk shows or even to be interviewed, he usually needed more than a couple of drinks to relax himself enough so that he could answer questions. He was not prepared for what came. And of course, the interviewers were asking him questions based on their having read On the Road, a book he had finished years before. He was a totally different man. In between the completion of On the Road and the publication, he wrote 12 books, none of which were published.
Well, a lot of people have asked me why did I write that book or any book. All the stories I wrote were true, because I believed in what I saw. I was traveling west one time at the junction of the state line of Colorado, its arid western one, and the state line of poor Utah. I saw in the clouds, huge and massed above the fiery golden desert of Evenfall, the great image of God with forefinger pointed straight at me, through halos and rolls and gold folds that were like the existence of a gleaming spear in his right hand, which saith, "Come on, boy, go thou across the ground. Go moan for man. Go moan. Go groan. Go groan alone. Go roll your bones alone. Go thou and be little beneath my sight. Go thou and be minute as seed in the pod. Go thou, die hence. And of this world report you well and truly. Anyway, I wrote the book because we're all gonna die.
Kerouac, at a very young age, watched his brother Gerard die, his older brother. And there's a book called Visions of Gerard where Kerouac recounts that in The Grief in the Family. Then Kerouac lived on to see his father die and take care of him when he was on his deathbed. So Kerouac got an early glimpse of 100% death and old age and sickness and decay, which are basic to Buddhist idea of life.
Jack was not your average drunkard. So that his drinking, in a sense, was an aspect of his personality that one had, in a sense, to respect, even at the moment that one was sorry about it. Well, I didn't want him to suffer anymore, and if a drink made him feel better and he was set on it, what was one to do? I mean, I knew, in other words, that whatever he did, he was serious about it. He wasn't being trivial, and you don't interfere with a man's struggle with his destiny if you love that man and also respect him, as I did.
Jack Kerouac married 3 times. He met his first wife, Frankie Edith Parker, in the 1940s, and they maintained a lifelong correspondence.
On the 10th anniversary of Jack's death, I was in San Francisco, and I felt very close to him. I went over to 20M Russell Hyde, and I painted his house that he lived in, where he wrote upstairs in the attic, with Neil and Carolyn. And then I came back from that, and it was a real foggy day and everything, and I felt very sad. So this is the poem I wrote to him in his memory of how I feel about him. I've always been him, and he's always been me. We grew up inside, seeking one another, and only finding the back of the mirror in others, while all the time we both were in front of it looking in.
The theme of the conference, rising out of Kerouac's art and his take on the world, has been the realization of heart, tender heart, rising out of pained heart, vulnerable heart. The conference is a reminder of a continuity of heart feeling, which was lost somewhat in the 60s and lost a good deal in the 70s and in the early part of the 80s with giant military budgets completely obscured as far as heart being a public reference point. And yet we are made of tender heart. That is the nature of our bodies. So that's the theme of the conference. Guard the heart.
So in the last page of On the Road, I describe how the hero, Dean Moriarty's come to see me all the way from the West Coast just for a day or two. We've just been back and forth across the country several times in cars, and now our adventures are over. We're still great friends, but we have to go into later phases of our lives. So there he goes, Dean Moriarty, ragged in the moth-eaten overcoat he brought specially for the freezing temperatures of the East. Walking off alone, and last I saw him, he rounded the corner of 7th Avenue, eyes on the street ahead, and bent to it again. Gone. So, in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken-down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the West Coast, and all that road going, and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. In an hour, I know by now that children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight the stars will be out, and don't you know that God is Pooh Bear? The evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dims on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that blesses the earth, darkens all the rivers, cups the peaks, and folds the final shore in. Nobody knows what's going to happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. Think of Dean Moriarty, I even think of old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. Think of Dean Moriarty, I think of Dean Moriarty.